Hey everyone, Steve here, and welcome back to Top 20 Favorite Movies. We're in the top 10 now. Sorry about how long it's been since the last one. Um, I have no excuse, as always. So I'm going to stop making excuses, and we're just going to get into talking about some movies. We're in top 10 territory now, and it's really hard to put these in order, as always. But because pretty much these remaining 10 movies are all pretty much, I would consider them, my favorites. So let's get started. Okay, coming in at number 10 is a movie that either people really like or they really hate. It seems like there's no middle ground for this movie. I'm one of the people who really loves it, and that is going to be, I don't know if these show up on the, Lucy's so dark in here, I don't know if the covers of these videos even show up, but it's the Blair Witch Project. Imagine, if you will, a time when the internet was still a new thing. Found footage movies didn't exist. There were two or three before this one, but nothing really memorable. I know that in today's world we're oversaturated with them, and none of them are really good. They're not. And it's like anyone with a camera can just make a found footage movie and try and make money off of it without really trying. So take yourself back to the late 90s, where we didn't have 50 found footage movies every year, and the internet marketing for this movie, before we talk about the movie itself, was just pure genius. There is a website, and it still exists. That basically they were trying to present this as this was real. Unlike found footage movies nowadays, where things are framed a little too perfectly. If there's that shot that they want to get, all of a sudden, the camera, they make sure the camera gets it. They look a little too clean, a little too polished. This movie is just raw. Raw. That's the word that I would use to describe this movie. So the marketing for this was brilliant. They really went all out to portray this as real. Now, I never once thought it was real. Whether you did or not is beside the point. The most important thing to mention here is that if you're trying to sell this as real, you need to have actors in it who can sell that, who can make you believe that this is really happening. And the three actors in this movie really do that, as far as I'm concerned. They don't come off as fake, or, I mean, it's improv is what it is. There's no script for these. I think when people bash this movie, what they really need to understand is you've got to give these three people credit. Not only did they act in this movie, they filmed the movie. These people really were put into the woods with two cameras and given very minimal direction. And so they acted in the movie, they filmed the movie. How many other movies do you know where the actors actually film it for you too? And it was all improv for the most part. From what I understand in the making of it, they got like little notes every day to kind of guide them, but they were really left on their own to do this themselves, and they portray it perfectly, as far as I'm concerned. This movie, like I said, Lucy found footage movies are too clean, too polished, too pretty looking. You don't believe it's real. This was filmed on like a handheld camcorder and one black and white, like 16 millimeter, and then that's it. The shaky camera is just real. It's just it's not a gimmick in this movie. And what this movie is watching these three characters slowly descend into hopelessness, despair, and fear. And they portray it perfectly. You watch them at the beginning of the movie, they're all these cocky, kind of arrogant kids, and you slowly watch them, once they fully realize what they're into and what is happening, and that it's too late for them to get out of it, they portray fear and hopelessness in a very real way. A lot of people say there's too much arguing and too much. Well, that's real. That's what would happen in a situation. If you're three people stranded out in the woods, your frustration and your fear, you're gonna throw that at whoever you can, and that's gonna be the other two people who are with you. You're gonna fight with each other. You're gonna get angry at each other because you have no other outlet for that to let it out. I feel that the actress who plays Heather needs a lot more credit. People say she comes off as being bitchy. Yes, because that's the character. She starts off being in control, and I'm in charge, and she's the boss. And you see that she realizes what she's done, not only to herself, but more importantly, to the two guys that she's with, Mike and Josh. She realizes that she did this to them. She brought them here, maybe without even telling them the full story about what they were really getting into or what they were going to be exploring, and the guilt that weighs on her, and realizing that it's her fault, so to speak. Another complaint is that from others, not from me, is that you don't see anything. That quote, "nothing happens." Anyone who says nothing happens in this movie, you need to look closer. Because again, when I watch a movie, I try to put myself in the position of the characters. And I got news for you. If I'm out in the woods with just two other people, and there's noises at night, and there's piles of rocks outside my tent in the morning that were not there before, these creepy stick figure things hanging in the trees, one of my friends disappearing in the middle of the night without a word, finding his teeth and some hair in a bundle of sticks outside my tent, all that, I'm gonna freak the fuck out, I can guarantee you. And I think anyone else would. Anyone who says that nothing happens, oh, it's not scary, put yourself in that position and then tell me it's not scary. Is it a horror movie? No. It's a psychological, chilling. This is my go-to Halloween movie to watch on Halloween every year, and it is so unsettling and it's so chilling to me. It creeps me out in a not in a ooh I'm scared kind of way, but in a this is kind of disturbing kind of way. Even though you never see the witch, so to speak, you feel her presence. The fact that they're following a compass and walking in one direction all day and they end up exactly where they started from, you could look at it and say, oh, they're just lost. The more sinister thing to say is that the witch is actually manipulating the very woods around them. And she actually has that ability to trap people in these woods. That final shot of Mike in the corner is the most creepiest, chilling final shots of a movie ever, in my opinion. For a scary movie, it is chilling. Best final shot in a horror movie or scary movie, whatever you want to call it. Best final shot ever. I'm stuttering a lot, I'm sorry. So you've got great actors who portrayed this as real, who convinced me that it was, even though I knew it's a movie and it's not. They did amazing improv. They filmed the movie themselves. A lot of credit needs to go to these people for what they accomplished. And again, at a time when this style of movie wasn't a thing, whereas nowadays it is. I watch this, like I said, every Halloween. It's my go-to Halloween movie because it creeps me out genuinely every time I see it. So, coming in at number 10 is The Blair Witch Project. Okay, coming in at number 9, for anyone who is a huge fan of this series, it might come as a shock that I'm putting it down at number 9. But here's my Star Wars box set. So I have to pick one movie. I'm going to pick the first, which has been later called Episode 4 or A New Hope. To me, it's just Star Wars, because that's when it was originally released. That's what it was called, just Star Wars. I'm not a huge Star Wars nerd. You know, I love the movies quite a bit. I don't live and breathe Star Wars as some people do, and I don't hold it up as like you know, the holy grail of cinema, because it's not. First of all, I'm picking the original movie because it has a beginning, it has an end. When it comes to trilogies, I know that people say that Empire Strikes Back is the better movie, and in a lot of ways it is, but it has no beginning and it has no end. And for me to say that that's a favorite movie of mine is difficult when there's no beginning or end. So I am picking the original Star Wars. I don't need to say too much about it, do I? It's Star Wars. Do I have to really talk that much about Star Wars? What can I say that hasn't been said already? Technologically, the achievements that were done in it. The reason, I guess I can focus more on why it's lower on the list for me, is that it is a simple little adventure story, told in a very grand scale, but it, plot-wise and character-wise, it's no different than things we've seen in the past. It was just the way that it was implemented that made it revolutionary, and did change, and I give it credit for changing the way that we view science fiction films today. But I don't hold it up as the highest, you know, level of perfection that a lot of people do. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand why people do. I'm a big Star Wars fan, but I'm not that big of one, and I guess that's the point here. You've got a great cast. You've got Harrison Ford, you've got Carrie Fisher, Mark Hamill, Alec Guinness as Obi-Wan Kenobi is brilliant. You've got the introduction of one of the best villains of all time, Darth Vader. I guess I need to touch on the fact that our buddy George Lucas has changed and altered these movies so much. And I don't want to get into that too much, but just real quick, that when you say that that you like Star Wars, or it's one of your favorite movies, it's very hard to know which version you're talking about, because there's so many. It's been changed so much and tampered with so much. I do have the original on VHS over there somewhere. So I do have the original film as it was meant to be, without all the nonsense that George Lucas added into it. But it's very hard to know which version of the movie you're referring to. I say if you can hunt down a copy of the original, unaltered Star Wars, do yourself a fan, especially if you're one of these people who holds it up in it as you're such a huge fan, that do yourself a favor and watch the original unaltered version before all of George Lucas's little, I'm going to add CGI rocks over here and have a giant creature walk in front of the screen during the stormtrooper interrogation. Such an iconic moment, and then you've got this giant CG creature whose body fills the entire screen walking in front. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking about it, Steve. Star Wars, it's a fun fantasy adventure story, done really well. And that's why I'm not going to get too much into Star Wars. I don't think I need to say much more about it, because it speaks for itself. There's nothing I could say that could add to what's already been said billions of times over about Star Wars. So, number 9, Star Wars. All right, Oscar's going to join us for this one. So, I guess he's I guess he's giving his pick out of these 5 movies as for what he thinks is the best. Coming in at number 8 is going to be Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I'm sure I've talked before on this channel about how I'm a huge fan of classic animation, hand-drawn animation, particularly from the 40s. I mean, the 30s through 50s, really, but the 40s is when animation was, to me, at its peak. And so, thank you, Oscar. Apparently, he just wanted to give his opinion and then leave. So I'm a huge fan of animation. It's one of my lifelong loves, because I appreciate the art form, and I appreciate the work that goes into making an animated movie. But we'll talk more about that later, because this is not a completely animated movie. It is a live-action animated hybrid. Now, it's nothing new. These types of things have been done since the teens, maybe even sooner, but I know of at least since like the How would you say that? You would call it the 1920s, the 20s, and the 30s, the 30s. What would you call the teens? The teens? Because you have to be specific now, because now we're in the 2000 and teens. So you have to differentiate. Okay, let's not go there, Steve. It's a good question, but let's not think about it right now. Live action animation combinations have been done for about 100 years. Nothing new, but there was always, the believability was never fully there. You never truly believed that the people and the cartoons existed in the same physical space. Who Framed Roger Rabbit took the concept to a whole new level, where because the key, and I believe some of the people who made the movie say that it's about interaction. Objects on set were manipulated and moved, so that when the cartoons were drawn on, into the film, it would look like they were moving things, and things were reacting to their weight and their movement. It sells it. Those little touches sell the belief that it's real. The late great Bob Hoskins. If you watch this movie again, watch Bob Hoskins, and what he is doing in this movie is brilliant. Again, in previous kind of live action cartoon combination movies, you never really believe that the person is looking at the cartoon character. They're looking in the direction where they're going to be drawn, but that's about it. Bob Hoskins looks like he is looking directly at them, and as he's talking, he can turn, look away, and then look back to exactly the same spot he was looking before. You truly believe that he is talking to and interacting with these cartoon characters. You believe it. I do. There are things in this movie that I still don't know how they pulled off. I don't know how they did it. The fact that they are using the 1940s as the setting and that style of animation, since I'm a fan of that era, that adds to my liking of this movie. You've got Christopher Lloyd. Now, here's one thing. If I were to say anything, it's not a negative, but it's supposed to be like this murder mystery kind of movie. But as soon as you meet Christopher Lloyd as Judge Doom, you know he's the villain. You know, there's no shock when it's revealed that he's the villain, because you know he is. But Christopher Lloyd is great in everything he does. And like I said, the great Bob Hoskins does an amazing job here. And the time, effort, and energy that went into making this, and making it believable, and making it work right, is mind-blowing to me. I don't think we will ever see, I mean, this is from like 1988, I don't think we'll ever see another movie that is a live-action animation hybrid done this perfectly ever again, as far as I'm concerned. So, coming in at number 8. Is that where I'm at? 8? I'm losing track again. At number 8 is Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Okay. Coming in at number 7. Remember a while back when I said that, yes, cynical, bitter Steve actually does have a love story in his top favorite movies. And here it is. It is a love story, but it's a very sad, depressing, tragic love story. And that is Leaving Las Vegas. If you haven't seen this movie, I can't recommend it enough. Simplest of plots that I can tell you, to put it in simple terms, Nicolas Cage is Ben, who's a chronic alcoholic, who meets Elizabeth Shue, who plays Sarah, who's a prostitute, and they form a very unlikely, unconventional relationship. And so I'm going to talk about both these actors and characters separately. Nicolas Cage as Ben, he won an Oscar for his performance here, deservedly so. I believe that Elizabeth Shue deserves one just as much. But what Nicolas Cage does, and we all know Nicolas Cage as the quirky, zany, look at his other movies. And here, what you get is a portrayal of end-stage alcoholism, and that's the key phrase, is end stage. We've seen alcoholics in movies before. They're look at them, they're drunk again, and they're funny, and that's not this. This movie shows the darkness, the just that black pit of despair and death that alcoholism really is. I know I have a personal reason for liking this movie as much as I do and how it speaks to me, but it captures it perfectly, and Nicolas Cage does an amazing job with it in showing someone who is dying of alcoholism. He portrays perfectly when your body and your mind are shutting down due to this horrible, horrible illness. On the other hand, you have Elizabeth Shue, who I always love actors or actresses who can speak volumes without saying a word, and she does so much of that in this movie. Now let me just say this about Elizabeth Shue. She is beautiful, and she's playing a prostitute, so you would think that there's going to be a little bit of sexiness in there. There's not. Sex is the furthest thing on my mind when I watch this movie, because you don't view her in that way. I feel sorry for her. I feel terrible for her. Spoiler alert, she gets beaten in this movie. She gets raped in this movie. It is not a glamorous, sexy portrayal of anything. It is a dark, disturbing glimpse into the reality of what someone who's a prostitute might have to face. She has a pimp in this movie who doesn't last long. The way that the story is told, and it's through her eyes really, is again subtlety. Subtlety goes so far. When we first meet this pimp character, in the dialogue you realize that she actually was trying to get away from him. She actually fled the state to get away from him, and he has tracked her down and found her again. So you get that bit of backstory without actually seeing it, and how abusive he is to her. Now he, spoiler alert, doesn't make it out alive. He does die, but it's not shown on camera. It is implied, heavily implied. You know that this pimp is going to die, but it's not shown. Again, subtlety. What she does so well, when I talked about how she can convey things without saying a word. The first night that she is with Ben, being a prostitute is her job. So she's in job mode. She goes to his hotel room and is saying, okay, for this much money you can do this, and for this much money I'll let you do this to me. And she is all about business. And so when he tells her that he doesn't care about any of that, that he's willing to pay her to just stay and talk with him, that he doesn't want sex, the look on her face is total confusion. She's never heard of this. This is so foreign to her that anyone could not want sex from her, that's all she's ever known. And that someone would say, I'm going to pay you just to stay here and talk with me, is so baffling to her. It's perfect. This is just like a perfect movie. The way that I feel about this movie is, it's a nice idea that we all have a soulmate out there, or for every one of us there's the one out there somewhere. Now, on a planet of billions of people, the odds of anyone finding the one are slim to none. But what this movie shows, and what it asks, is what's worse, never finding your soulmate, or finding them when it's too late? And that's what's happening here. These are two people who found each other too late. It's a relationship that is doomed right from the get-go. It's too late for them. They're both too broken. They are both too far gone, particularly Ben, but they're both too far gone to turn back. And yet they need each other. He needs her, because whether he'll admit it or not, he knows that he's dying, but he doesn't want to die alone. So he needs her. She, on the other hand, needs him to feel normal, to feel like a normal human being who's worthy of something other than just her body and sex. You know, she needs him to feel normal. So the two of them need each other in this kind of dysfunctional relationship, and yet functional at the same time. It's so beautiful, and that they do work together, but at the same time, you know that it's self-destructive, and that there's no point, because, well, A, he's dying, and B, she seems to be at a point where she's not going to change what she does either. That moment when she finally, even though she agrees originally that she'll never ask him to change, later in the movie she finally has her breaking point, and she does ask him to change. Another brilliant scene, by the way. But she's not willing to change either. There's so many layers and so many levels going on in this movie. It is beautiful, but much like with Manchester by the Sea, even more so, you need to be in the right frame of mind to handle this movie. It is depressing, it is dark, it is bleak, it is hopeless, and I love it. I love it, because I love when movies don't pull any punches, and they don't hold back, and they will show you the reality of things that other movies may kind of gloss over, or try to make glamorous, or try to pretty it up. This movie doesn't do that. It doesn't do that at all. And I highly recommend it. I could talk about it forever. It belongs higher on my list, but as we get into what remains here, I couldn't justify doing that, because I've got what I think are some classics coming up, and I just couldn't do it. It deserves to be higher. I wish I could have put it higher, but I'm going to leave it where it is, at number 7, Leaving Las Vegas. If you haven't seen it, do yourself a favor and watch it. Alright, and our last movie for today is going to be my number 6 movie of all time, and that is the original 1933 version of King Kong. I do enjoy Peter Jackson's version as well, but nothing can top the original. Black and white, 1933. I guess the biggest thing to talk about here is, again, technical achievement. Firstly, stop motion animation. If anyone's unfamiliar with what stop motion animation is, that is where you take a actual real object, take a picture of it, move it, like this ashtray for example, move it, take a picture, move it again, picture, and keep doing that. And then when you play the film back, it would appear as if the ashtray was moving across the table by itself. That's stop motion animation. And King Kong, all the dinosaurs in this movie are stop motion. Does it look fake by today's standards? Yes. Does that make it any less believable? No. No. You still feel for King Kong especially. He is still a living, breathing character, even if he is just a puppet who's being manipulated and moved one frame at a time. There are things going on in this movie that, again, I always appreciate the work and the effort that goes into something. There's techniques being used in this movie that had never been used before. All together, rear projection, through a mirror, 3 levels of film, the list goes on and on. There's some shots in this movie that have like 4 or 5 separate visual tricks going on to achieve what you see. It's mind-blowing. The music is so epic and so fitting. Fay Wray, she's reduced to simply screaming a lot, yes. If there's one thing I could change about this, it would be that, is that she's constantly screaming, which again is real. That's what you would really do if you were surrounded by dinosaurs and a giant gorilla. But it gets to be a bit much, but I cannot take away from that amidst all these visual trickery and effects, there is a story, and most importantly, it's about King Kong being ripped from his home, taken to New York City, and put on display as like a sideshow freak. And then of course he breaks loose and goes on a rampage, but he's not a monster. He's not a villain. King Kong is not the evil creature who's out to destroy everything. He's just an animal. He's a very unreal large animal, but he is just an animal who's been ripped from his home, and he's put into a strange environment that he doesn't understand, and he reacts aggressively. So that when you get to that moment where he is shot down and falls off the top of the Empire State Building, it's not, yay, the monster's dead. It's, oh, you know, that poor thing, that poor creature. Look what they did to him. It's a wonderful twist on the genre of taking the old, like, monster movies where you want to see the monster destroyed, and that's not the case here. King Kong is one of the most sympathetic creatures to ever be put on film in a monster type role, and that we actually feel something for him. Visual effects are amazing for the time. This is 1933. The visual effects of Kong and the dinosaurs are amazing. Yes, they look dated, but it doesn't matter. The storytelling, there's an actual story going on here. There's an actual message about man tampering with nature and man interfering with nature. And it is a marvel to watch. And every time I watch this movie, I am impressed with what I'm seeing, and just how much work and effort had to have gone into doing it. There have been future iterations of King Kong, and I really don't like any of them with the exception of Peter Jackson's, which even that one is a bit too long and bloated, but it is effective. But for me, when it comes to King Kong, you've got to go with the original. If you haven't seen it, check it. I'm going to say it about all these movies coming up. If you haven't seen it, what is wrong with you? Watch these movies, because they're amazing classics that need to be seen as far as I'm concerned. So the original 1933 version of King Kong is my number 6 pick, and I guess that's it for today. We've got 5 more movies. I'm satisfied with what I have left. Again, it's really hard to put the placement of these, particularly here. This is probably the hardest part, as the 10 movies I had left, putting them in the bottom 5 or the top 5. That's probably the hardest part of this. But there we are. I got 5 left to go. I'm going to try and make sure it's not such a long time between videos. Hopefully I'll get the last one up pretty soon. So, but first I got to work on getting this one up, because you're watching this right now, and yet I haven't even edited or uploaded it yet. So wrap your brain around that one. Everyone, take it easy. Have a good day. Peace. And I will see you around for top 5 next time. All right? Peace.